in another minute or two. So take it away. Yeah, we're going live.
Yeah, that's something I'd like to rant about for about 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, since we had the NCAA championships this past weekend, it was a great weekend of wrestling, and we just saw.
Oh,
We're originally from New Jersey. New Jersey had five All-Americans, so they were tied for third with Wisconsin, and the other one escapes me, but Pennsylvania was on top as usual.
if you followed the women's side, Marlene Dede, she's one of my friend's daughters. She won
Okay,
one for Iowa, and her brother is going to be outstanding as a javelin thrower at Utah State.
awesome,
He
awesome.
already is outstanding. He's just gonna just keep building on that. Yeah. I tell you one thing about talent, it helps to have some.
It sure does. It sure does. We have a an old friend that used to say, and excuse my French, say you can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit.
That's absolutely. Hey, I tell you what, I'm gonna take my VPN off. I don't want me to get lost here. Hold on a second.
Oh yeah.
There we are. Good.
All right.
Sorry, I wanted to make sure my it was stable. When I steal movies off of BBC, so I have to pretend I live in London. So I
Okay. Hey.
so I like watch the rugby six Six Nations tournament. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm on VPN for a couple of weeks so I can watch the games. So that's
Okay.
but it kills if we're having a Zoom call here in the United States because it has to whatever it does
Yeah.
is down. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Coach, when we before we jumped on, you said to hold that question. So when we before we started, I asked you when you were at Utah State if they had wrestling, and you said yes. And so we had Greg Williams on the podcast a while back. He was or he just retired as the Utah Valley head
Yeah,
wrestling coach. I was wondering if
yeah.
you gentlemen had ever crossed paths.
He is an icon. He is I mean Utah wrestling is so much better than people think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm at Utah State my senior year. We were 16th ranked in football. We had a 20 game winner in basketball. We were no, I don't know, top 20 track and field team, top 10 wrestling program, national champions in volleyball on the women's side, a real sports powerhouse. Then they hired a new athletic director who only liked basketball. And so, as always happens, um, he everything went to basketball. So the football program went to hell. Track and field still fought through. We still had a lot of All-Americans and Olympians after that because we had such a great track and field tradition. But it's just one of those things that you just have to, I mean, he once said to us, he expects us to throw 220 yards this year. Now, I don't know if you know anything about the discus, but 220 yards is 660 feet, which is about 420 feet farther than the world record. So that's a pretty good throw. But so football went to hell, wrestling got cut, volleyball had struggles for generations, and our men's basketball team, which was his baby, wasn't very good. So there's a life lesson in there. Don't get rid of collegiate wrestling. It's such a great sport. Intercollegiate wrestling is just such a great sport. But hey, I get it. It's all about the money now. I mean, and it was then too. But yeah, I can rant on this all day. You just let me know, okay?
Yeah. Well, the good thing about wrestling now is that with the NCAA now sanctioning women's wrestling, that kind of takes the Title IX. That was the big thing during
The
the
argument, yeah,
mid to late '90s was that it was Title IX, and that's why a lot of programs got cut. But now we're seeing
yeah,
just a resurgence, especially maybe not so much Division One. There have been some programs, like University of Arkansas Little Rock is only in their fifth season as a program. They just had their first two All-Americans
that's
this
right.
year. Coach Erzman was the NWCA Coach of the Year, and he was also the NCAA Tournament Coach of the Year. So, we are seeing that. But yeah, to have now you can have a women's team and you can have a men's team that kind of balances out that whole Title IX thing.
Well, I've always been a fan of Title IX. I think it's great. The problem is the way they administrate it. I've been in this fight with people for years. There's a certain university in the Big Ten. I'm not going to mention it, but it's in Michigan, and it's not in the state of Michigan. It's another school that's in the Big Ten. And they were giving out rowing scholarships to any girl that was over 6 foot, and they never had been in a boat, just to balance out the Title IX thing. There's a university I know of that if you're female and you can walk, you're on the track and field team. So they can balance out the numbers without giving scholarships. And it's just, that's not the idea. And I do think that the Olympic sports should be treated differently than, like football and stuff. I get that. And I wouldn't be surprised, I never thought in my lifetime it'd be what's going on is going on now, but I wouldn't be surprised if, you see even collegiate football kind of move over to a completely different style. But enough of that. Let's talk about what's important.
Yeah, so Coach, we like to start everything with a little bit of a through line, and so I think the best way to start this for you is just to kind of give you some flowers, as the cool kids like to say these days, and give you a little bit of props. But one of the things, I'm a strength and conditioning coach, as Jimmy is, but I also teach physical education, and I coach ultra marathoners and wrestling. But your push pull squat hinge carry has been such an influential uh, template for how I train my athletes. I just wanted to say thank you for that. That was something I heard you say a very, very long time ago, and that has stuck
Yeah.
with me and has always kind of been the foundation of how I plan my strength and conditioning workouts for my athletes. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm real big about I wouldn't want to call it even okay, I do have overwhelming philosophies on how I coach people. I mean, the most famous would be the body is one piece. I got that from John Jerome. So I'm a big believer that the human body is one piece. You break up with your girlfriend, probably not a good day to do heavy snatches. You got diarrhea, not a good day to do back squats. The body is one piece, okay? But and that's why I don't like split training of any kind. I'm a whole body kind of guy. Well, when you take that concept and then you say, okay, well, what's the system you're going to use in the weight room? Honestly, if you're doing tumbling and loaded carries, you're going to have a pretty good American football team. You're probably going to be okay wrestling team. But, if you need more size, well, then you got to squat, push, pull. If you got throwers and, anybody who's got to explode into somebody else, you got to hinge. And then all of a sudden you just sit back, and by having the philosophy here, you can put the structure, the systems on top of that and build yourself into a program. So for me, and I think this is important for the young coaches, you got to sit back and cross your arms and say, I'm not going to be a buffet table of a coach. These are the things that we're going to do. Now, obviously, you leave a little bit of time in the day or your system to allow other things to come in. Basically, I'm a big believer in Pareto's law, the 80-20 rule, that 20% of what you do gives you about 80% of the benefits. That's a really important thing for me. But the hard thing, of course, is figuring out all the time, what is that 20%? So there's going to be some experimentation, sure. But as long as you keep yourself in a structure, you can kind of nod your head and go, okay, this fits here, that fits there. Push, pull, hinge, squat, loaded carry. I come to your place and you're doing quarter squats, no loaded carries, and for every pull you do 30 pushes. Well, I think I can help your people right away just by getting the numbers right, just by adding those little, and I mean, it's not that big a deal to turn a program around if you have a philosophy and a structure to start with.
And Coach, before we get too far underway here, I've been really diving into your podcast, diving into your Q&A with Pat Flynn, and diving into some of your protocols that we'll get into today. But let everyone know where they can find you, where they can find your content, your books, everything else you got going on.
Sure. Well, I have a site called danjohnuniversity.com, and we'll give a discount to your listeners. So the discount, it sounds like ESPN, but we added E in there to make it legal. ESPEN, ESPN, ESPEN. I'll give you a massive discount for 3 months, and yay for you. But danjohnuniversity.com, there's probably 1,000 pages of free, free mini books and, well, books, stuff, articles by a whole bunch of people. There's a thing in there called the workout generator that you plug in what equipment you have, how many days a week you want to work, and you press a button and it gives you a workout, and then you can change it as much as you want. It's just brilliant. It's my brain, but with an algorithm, so it can answer every single question you have without having to email me or have me walk you through it. I love it. The forum is very good. People are very polite on the forum, and it's nice. So yeah, I have a YouTube channel. I don't know what it's called. I really don't, honestly. I don't. I mean, I do. Sorry, it's got to be like Dan John Strength. I don't know what it is, but it's something like that. And then over there on Instagram, I'm Coach Dan John. But all those little places are. I mean, and thankfully, that stuff's all dying. Instagram is, you know, that thing they now call X, TikTok, all that stuff. Serious people are getting away from all of it. I mean, no offense to any of the three of us, but none of us have the look. I don't show enough skin, and I'm an ugly bastard. And so, if you show enough skin, and like this, I mean, most of the guys never have their shirts on. And you know what? They're also 25. Yeah, when I was 25, I never had my shirt on. I'm 67. I mean, I could take my shirt off if you like. It's going to just charge you guys a little bit more on this call. And then, and then the information's simply nonsense. From something as extreme as the Liver King to just horrific training ideas and concepts, and stuff that you might be able to do when you're young, but you never do it to an athlete. You would hurt athletes, and you would really probably hurt anybody over 35. Yeah. So thank you for asking, though. I really do appreciate it. Okay.
Yeah, and that's why I like a lot of your content and a lot of your information because you keep it simple. I've been really diving deep into the armor building complex,
Yeah.
doing it like 2 to 3 days a week, throwing the humane burpee in there one day
Yeah.
a week. And it's super simple. I can get it done rather time efficient. I don't have to work out for hours at end. I get a bang for my buck. Some days where I'm getting an itch, go carry some kettlebells, do some Turkish get-ups. I kind of like that philosophy. And being a lifelong athlete, was that just a process of educating yourself as a strength and conditioning coach, growing as an athlete, and just trying to find the best bang for your buck ways of strength training?
Yeah. My favorite places I've ever coached were always high academic schools. I volunteer at the university up here. And it's very high academics. My students are students first. The high schools I taught at were always my lawyer is a former athlete of mine. My doctor is a former athlete. When I die, the funeral director I'm going to go to is a former athlete of mine. My former athletes are professors and lawyers and accountants, and you know, their their academics were far more important than their discus throwing, their shot putting, their outside linebackering. Okay, and I knew that, and so what I always try to do was I wanted to make sure I respected their their lives and their big goals, their big kid goals. The 2 decades, 3 decades from now stuff. And I also wanted them to have grandchildren and great grandchildren. I wanted to be able to walk up a flight of stairs at 67. And so, what I would constantly try to do is try to make sure I helped with the balance of their academics and their athletics and their social life and their. I wasn't always good at it. No, that's not true. That I was not. But uh, when I realized it, really what changed my life was having my two daughters. And when you've got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I was working two jobs, things change. And, I had two full-time jobs, and I was still, throwing as an elite thrower and Highland gamer. And I use this thing called my brain versus my brawn. And it seems to make a difference and that's the idea. If you can get yourself to think through things, and I have a number of things, like one of the questions I ask is, what are your values? And I try to align my training with your values. I try to align my training with your not just I call them the goals. the physical, the financial, the emotional, the social, the O's. And I want to make sure that what we're doing aligns with the rest of your life. From there, of course, we can talk about all kinds of things. A lot of it is brain work. A lot of it is a goal achievement work. I always joke that everyone talks about goal setting. Any idiot can set goals. I want to ride a unicorn around the planet. Well, that's a good goal. Now, there's problems with that goal. It's hard to get around the planet. Unicorns aren't really good over oceans. Isn't everyone, I don't need to repeat that. Everyone knows that. But goal achievement is the $1,000,000 question. And when you start to work with athletes, the longer and longer you work, I wouldn't say the more shortcuts you get. In fact, it's the opposite. The more you fall in love with the fundamentals and the basics. We've got a great wrestling tradition over the mountain here at a place called Wasatch High, and they were famous for one of their athletes, Cole Sanderson. Do you remember him?
Kale and Kale.
Yeah, and the famous statement about they did what 1,000 single leg takedowns a training session. If you've only countered it 500 times a day for the last year, you're in trouble. That's repetition. And so I really got back to the fundamentals, and I'm really big into the basics. And after a while, you realize that the fundamentals are the secret sauce. We're going to out repetition you at the fundamentals. Now, you might do a lot more fun things or more things, but you're not going to do the sport itself more than this. You're not going to do what makes you throw far or hit hard or whatever it is. Yeah.
Coach, I love hearing you say that. And I also love hearing you talk about how you think that things like TikTok and Instagram are kind of going by the wayside, because I've found, and with some of the coaches that I speak with, is that the kids don't want to do the basic fundamentals, this doing the simple things well, as I like to say to the athletes. And we often talk about how it's because all they're seeing is this highlight reel content, whether it's a play in a game or whether it's some, standing on one leg on a Bosu ball doing an overhead squat. And it's like, well, you can't even walk and chew gum at the same time. We need to work on the basic fundamentals. So I love hearing you say all that stuff, but I also love hearing you talk about how things like TikTok and Twitter and those things are kind of going by the wayside, because it is this thing where we're trying to get young athletes. What's
Yeah.
that?
In our field, it's
Yeah,
starting.
yeah.
Now, I mean, it's the only way some politicians even know how to reach their people. But if you look at the numbers, they're not reaching anybody.
Right.
It is that the name just Henry Fosdick, I think it was, talked about a concept called habits of the heart, and it was later changed into a concept called a room full of mirrors. And the worst way you can have community is a room full of mirrors. If everybody in the room looks the same, acts the same, talks the same, you're not in a community, you're in a room full of mirrors. And one of the things, it's a phrase I got from University of Michigan when I was up there with them, is you got to grade the mirror sometimes. You got to grade that mirror. And I think, and if you go into an echo chamber like X or Twitter, whatever it's called now, a far right politician will post something, and then everyone will come in and say, F this, F that, right on. But they're not, it's just an echo chamber. If I go on there and I say, give me an exercise. Okay, lunges suck. Everyone who follows my work could go, right on. Yeah, they suck. Yeah, right on. Yeah. Well, that doesn't engage community. That doesn't make us smarter. We're all just looking at each other in the mirror. And I feel very strongly about those statements. Very strongly.
Coach, we were talking about wrestling, and I heard you say a couple times with Pat, you have some standards as far as strength numbers, whether it be for track athletes or for football players. Have you ever, I'm going to assume you've worked with some wrestlers. Do you have some standards for some high school wrestlers or college wrestlers as far as numbers they should be
up there is a magazine called Strength and Health. And the first one I ever got talked about a high school wrestling program. And listen, so what am I, 10 years old when I bought my first Strength and Health for 50 cents, and it's right up there. And the coach said, that you should be able to clean and press your body weight and snatch your body weight. And then we're talking about Olympic bars. And then he said, when you go shake hands with an opponent and know that you can whip him over your head, that gives you some, that gives you some confidence. So for me, I always thought that, and I still think, by the way, and later when I was 14, I wrote down in my journal that if all I did 50 years from now, that's funny because that's when I would have been 64. If all I did was the clean and press and the squat snatch, I would take care of everything that a human would need. And it's funny because little Danny John at age 14, 1971, was right. So I still would stick by it. Now, you guys could say, well, yeah, well, I'd like him to, double body weight deadlift. But if you look at the speed and power needs of a wrestler, being just stupid strong helps, right? I mean, just farmer strength, dad strength, whatever, I mean, if you got a grip that just, and you can't, like thick bar deadlifts, I always thought would be a good idea. Thick pull-ups would be, just get that crushing grip, but you'll get all that with the clean and press and snatch body weight. Is that answer perfect? No. You depending on the equipment you have and your ability to coach it, you might have to say, well, we're going to do this with power lifts, and then you'll have a range of numbers that would be appropriate there. But for wrestling, I have to agree with what I read in 1967. If you can snatch your body weight, you can throw your opponent over your head. And trust me, if you can snatch body weight, you have a killer grip, you have good mobility, you have power. And if you can press it also, you've got strength. So is that too simple of a response?
Not at all.
That's why we love your work, Coach.
The question would be, is how many at the collegiate level? I'm curious, if just a guesstimate, how many collegiate wrestling programs are actually doing snatches?
Well, probably very few now.
Yeah.
I mean, so the problem we've had in the world of sports for a long time, in the 1940s, a Stanford shot putter was Otis Chandler. The guy's name was Otis Chandler. And their Stanford track and field coach said if he ever caught any of his athletes lifting weights, he would kick them off the team. This is the 1940s. Well, Otis didn't listen, and he started lifting weights, and he broke, at the time, the longest standing world record the shot put. He broke a shot put record that had been around for 25 years. Since that day, by the way, Otis Chandler ended up being the publisher of the LA Times. So, Stanford guy, world record holding the shot put, publisher of the LA Times, which is why we all hate Stanford people. You can't just do one thing. Since that day, if you're a shot putter, you had to lift weights. Since that day, discus, hammer, javelin, high jump, long jump, all a track and field quickly moved into it. In the late 1950s, LSU was starting to lift weights as a football program. And in 62, the San Diego Chargers started to lift weights. Okay, so dead stop right there. James Councilman had his Indiana swimmers lift weights, but he also was trying to make machines to sell, so it never worked out as well. But most sports stayed away from weights. I read the Dan Gable story as a kid, and he used that little spring thing and push-ups and running. A friend of mine told me, well, they also trained on the universal machine. But boxing refused to lift weights for generations. Basketball wouldn't lift weights. Baseball is, when they finally did start lifting weights, they were all bodybuilders. Same problem with basketball. They lifted like bodybuilders, which makes no sense to me, So the issue with wrestling is, in fact, one of my favorite books, and if you're a wrestling coach and you don't have it, you should be beaten. But here it is. John Jesse's Wrestling Encyclopedia, which
got
is,
it.
you better have it. I'll come over and hand you a copy. I'll tell you that. But John Jesse, that book's from 76, and basically in the 70s, as I recall, wrestlers were doing just about everything. Now, then you stop and you go back and you look at what's going on in Eastern Europe and lots of the other wrestling places in the world. The Hindu wrestling tradition with the high rep squats, the wrestling traditions that you find throughout that kind of Central Asia, with I mean, just the volume work, some people, all kinds of weird little implements. Uh, but wrestling never really, it seems to me, came out and said, okay, here are the 3 lifts you need to do to be a good lifter. Would you agree with that? There's like in track and field, you say the event, and we all shrug and say, okay, here's the 3 lifts you should do for that event. Well, snatch, front squat, farmer walk. That's I just covered every single event. But I never got a sense from the wrestling world that there was that kind of clarity. Now, there are some friends of mine who do good work. Chip Morton, who used to be with the Bengals and now he's the strength coach, one of the strength coaches at South Carolina. His kids were wrestlers, and he helped the high school team, and he had some really good organized weightlifting. And there's some other friends of mine who Ethan Reeve used to be at Wake Forest. He's got a great wrestling strength and conditioning mind. So there's a lot that do it, but it doesn't seem like there's a consensus in the wrestling community. Now, if I'm wrong, just tell me I'm an idiot, no, and I'm fine. But I don't see it or haven't been exposed to, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I think a lot of that too is because I think a lot of wrestling coaches are a little protective of their secret sauce, so to speak, and
Yeah,
they don't want to let the cat out of the bag. It's
yeah,
very, very under wraps as to kind of what they do at Penn State. They're on a crazy run right now. They just won their, I think, 12th title in 14 years. And it's very secretive as to what they do. And I think that was always kind of the case. Maybe, I mean, Dan Gable was just work hard. Whatever you're doing, do a lot of
outwork,
it.
outwork.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
and that's great until you try to build a program from bottom to top. And that's one thing about track and field is that the more time I have a kid doing the event, the better and better they get. It's not time, years. The more years I have, like if I can get a kid to throw 12 years, the difference is night and day if I only have a kid for 4 years. And I think wrestling is that way also. Wouldn't you agree? The more time you spend on the mat, if you got, what, if my family's a track and field family and a military family, but if my family were wrestlers, I'm the youngest of 6. I'd have been deadly on the mat if they'd all wrestled, because when I was 5, I'd be a practice dummy, right? Trying to get my face off the carpet, And back then we didn't have good carpet, and so I'd learned, I'd learn a lot of escapes as a kid, and then some takedowns as appropriate. But yeah, and 10 years later, I'm a sophomore phenom in high school, right? Well, because I just have more mat time than the kid I'm shaking hands with. Yeah.
Coach, I am curious to your time working with track and field athletes. Have you got to work with any distance runners and kind of what that was like as far as getting them to lift and lift heavy and kind of lifts that you use for distance runners if you have worked with them?
Sure. Well, back here, I've got Percy Ceruti's books. In fact, there they are right there. And there's a new book coming out that I wrote the forward for he was that great Australian coach. He believed that marathoners should be able to deadlift double body weight. Marathoners should be able to bench press body weight. So it is in the track and field tradition. And I think that if what happened in track and field and weightlifting was the rise of Africa. When the African runners showed up, they were coming from cultures that, you started your morning by running 4 or 5 miles to school. You finished your afternoon by running 4 or 5 miles. And then the big event of the year might be a big race for all the kids. I make a point here. It shouldn't be surprising that the fastest sprinter of all time, Usain Bolt, comes from a country where sprinting is the national sport. So when the rise of the African distance runners showed up, they had a completely different view of what like Peter Schnell was doing in New Zealand and what the Australians were doing. It was just different. It was, and so what happened with running is in the 70s, 80s, is that we were kind of going this way with running being intertwined with the general conditioning, pull-ups, sit-ups, hill running, weightlifting, calisthenics, that. And then all of a sudden it just went, nope, that doesn't count. Run, run, run. You can't run enough. Now, the problem is if you didn't grow up in a culture that was run, 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 and you try to adopt it as a 18, 19-year-old, that's when all those injuries would show up. Interesting, here in the United States, then they all turned to yoga and stretching. And if you know about yoga and stretching and distance runners, there's a correlation, causation, I don't know. But the leading indicator that you're going to get hurt as a marathoner is that you stretch. You answer the question, yes. Next to the question is, do you stretch? Yes. Okay. That's 100% injury rate. No, I don't know what it is from there. But I'm just saying that, and of course, yeah. So I'm a big believer in lifting for distance. But I'm also a great believer in the tradition in track and field that you start off the year with a general training period. The Brits brought this back with Coe and Ovett. Ovett, thank you.
Yeah.
Steve Ovett, thanks. Sebastian Coe. Sebastian, of course, did a lot of circuit training. Up into the season, he was still circuit training. And they brought that back. And I think it was really masterful. And you could see it on the track that they were training a little different. It wasn't just, running loops. They were also, taking something else serious. I don't know how well I answered your question, but my belief is yes, you lift weights. I recommend easy strength for distance runners. I recommend as appropriate circuit training. I would do parkour if I was nowadays I'd throw some parkour in there. I would throw tumbling in there. I would throw cross-country skiing. I would try to really expand my distance runners repertoire of movement.
So, Coach, just to clarify, as a 48-year-old ultra marathoner, you're saying I'm doing the right thing by not stretching.
Well, well, those of us who've ever, so we do a series of stretches on Thursday's Tonic Thursday at my gym. Every place I coach at, generally we compete on Saturdays. So Thursday's always the easy day. And we do a series of stretches where you hold like this position for like a minute. Okay. And it's just a series of stretches. And then we hold it like this for a minute. And the two sides too. And it's just part of what we do. After you stretch your wrists, and I always tell people after we do that, now, what would it feel like to grab a bar right now? So after what you do, of course, stretching basically just turns off the nervous system, right? And it just goes, bleh, well, that's not a window for elite performance. So I'm fine with stretching. I think there's value to stretching. Keep it away from your performance, whatever your sport is. So find a window later in the day where you can do stretching. I'm a big believer in mobility, the free movement around every joint. And you'll notice I started with thumbs and I did fingers. I also recommend you work your toes, your ankle. Obviously certain places you can't do much with your elbows and your knees. But even so, even if you even just did a few gentle stretches with your elbows, you might find long-term it eases up some other issues. Mobility, yes. Stretching in an appropriate place.
And then one other thing you mentioned, all across the board for track athletes, regardless of the event, you mentioned heavy carries.
Yeah.
And so I just want for clarification for one of my cross country athletes, because we were out doing we do twice a week, we do a half a mile weighted walk.
Yeah, sure.
And he said, I'm a cross country runner. This has nothing to do with my sport. So I'm happy to hear that you said that, because I had to talk to him for a second to explain to him the benefits of doing a weighted walk for cross country.
Well, the biggest thing is to hold posture under stress. If you start running like this, when you're tired, you're not going to be very good. Another person who appreciates this point is a guy named Steve Magnus. He is he was the guy that he's a good friend of mine. Very proud of a decision he made a few years ago to stand up to a very toxic situation with one of our elite teams. And he quotes me every so often about how I coach female athletes. And one of the things, we won't, but yeah, the idea of how to get weightlifting to the elite female distance runner. Yeah.
So we got Dan John on the call. I got to ask some kettlebell questions. I'm more of a kettlebell guy than Rich. Um, I got my certification from Steve Maxwell back in the day, on and off. But anytime I have time to kind of lift, I have a set, so I'm always using kettlebells. So, couple questions, couple troubleshooting questions I have for you. As far as injuries or long term with kettlebells, because I know you do the daily swing challenges and stuff like that with your community. Do you find any issues as far as kettlebells long term?
Well, see, do you find any issues with doing push-ups every day? Yeah, my shoulders are killing me. Do you find any issues with doing pull-ups every day? Yeah, I can't straighten out my elbows and they feel like crap. Do you have any issues with running downhill every day? Yeah, my knees and quads are killing me. Anything you do to extremes, and anything you do that has any area to allow a little injury to sneak in is a problem. So if you're doing mindless sets of anything, I mean, I remember we used to do leg extensions to strengthen our knees for American football. And then 20 years later, they said, well, yeah, leg extensions hurt the knee. And I thought, well, yeah, but not the way we were doing. We weren't doing 1,000 bouncing reps. It was squeezed, and I maybe it tracks the patella, whatever. I don't know. Anything done to extremes in volume can be an issue. Anything done with any level of poor technique is going to be an issue. When there's some blocking and tackling methods in American football that can kill people, but there's also some safe ways to block and tackle. But in a game situation, when you have to tackle, you might find yourself in a bad situation. So is the car a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it sure gets you to Vermont a lot faster than walking. But if you drink and you drive at excessive speeds, there's the issue. So always keep in mind, I'm the moderate's moderate when it comes to everything in life. I'm a great believer in that. One of my teachers in school, his name was Socrates. He said, that moderation in all things. Great teacher. His buddy Plato, good man. Plato, by the way, means broad shoulders. It doesn't mean it's not his actual name. But so if you go to extremes in anything, you could get bounced, any second. But if you kind of stay in your lane, and the other thing too, and this is a hard thing for the probably 17 to 24-year-old athlete, is you got to be able to fold your arms and say, I'm good. That was the set said I had to do 30 and I did 12. Well, why did you only do 12? Because we had a game yesterday and my back hurts from, getting someone's helmet dug into my lower back, when he was running 18 miles an hour, oh, okay. So if you can use it, try to use that thing up here every so often, and that'll, honest to God, if you look back I hope you keep journals. But if you look back over your journals I use little things like this. So in my journals, I use little tabs. Can you see those tabs there?
Mm-hmm.
These tabs all mean different things to me. That's funny. This is actually a good journal. Orange is the days I weigh in overweight. Yellows are the days I weigh where my goal weight should be. So you'll notice at the beginning of this journal, we had a little issue. End of the journal, lots of yellows. But maybe take a little tab and go through all your journals and mark with a tab, real big one that you can see. And then take all your journals out again and go a couple days ahead and see that this injury wasn't a lightning bolt from Zeus. It was sniffing around a couple days before. Your dog vomited right before you went to bed, so you got to bed late. Your car had a flat tire 2 days before the injury. It's stuff. It's usually stuff. You had a bachelor party on Friday night, you went heavy Monday. You were dehydrated and still inebriated Monday when you were lifting. And there's almost always a story behind every injury. To the point, by the way, and this is for those who are strength and conditioning coaches who are listening, our gentle listeners. I think that anytime you have an injury in the weight room, you and the staff should talk about it. Is it the exercise? Is it the way we coach the exercise? Is there an equipment issue? And there's always the fourth option, are we working with an idiot? And by the way, that is one of the big, so those are the big four. So I'll blame, if it's the equipment has fallen off, I'll blame myself. If we didn't coach it well, I'll blame myself. Sometimes it's the exercise. There are some bad exercises that hurt. If you remember when box jumps were the craze, jumping on wooden boxes, I don't know of a serious coach who said, I just couldn't handle the shin injuries, those bloody shins, and people have to get stitches on their shins because of this exercise. There's got to be a better exercise, right? You follow my point? There's other exercises that hurt people. Stu McGill and I were talking a while ago. Stu, both of you?
No, of him, yes. I don't know him personally, but yeah.
He's a great man, and he was telling me about this split pelvis issue that's starting to show up because personal trainers are having people do excessive amounts of lunges. And so push-ups, push-ups can jack your shoulders up as much as not warming up and throwing a fastball, so there can be exercise problems. So this is bad exercise. That can't happen. Sometimes you'll find an exercise that's just flat out bad. Sometimes the equipment, either we didn't maintain it, or it's just not a good design, or it's a good design, but not for the age group we're working with. So you have to be able to be the big kid and make those big kid decisions, if that all makes sense.
I appreciate the sage wisdom, and that pretty much answered the other questions that I had. That being said, you brought up your journal and you showed, it was a good journal because you had a lot of days where you weighed where you wanted to. And following your content, I know your goals this year are you have a weight kind of goal and you have a financial goal. So I'm curious to how that is going and how you kind of attack achieving your goals for the year.
Sure. So I've had a bad 5 years. I don't know how much you want me to say, but it doesn't bother me. I'll be as candid as you want. Do you want me to go through the whole thing?
Sure.
So
If you want to.
5 years ago in June, my brother Phil died. A terrible thing. If you watch the movie on National Geographic called Rebuilding Paradise, the last third of it is his funeral. Okay. Paradise, California, the place that burned down. Okay. I was in England teaching, I got home and I got some really bad news from my daughter. And the next weekend, my other daughter got married. So it was a stressful time. And then in that 5 years, Tiffany and I, because of some issues, we divorced. And then she died a year and a half ago. And right after that, her mom died. My daughters, we almost lost my daughter and my son when he was born. And then of course, after her mom died and her grandmother died, she had a real tough miscarriage. Good news, she's pregnant again and everything's going fine. And so we'll have a little Eloin here soon. So I'm looking forward to that. So 3 years ago, I sat down and I said, I want to be around for my grandkids. And even though I like to flip cabers and be a big engine, I don't see an 87-year-old at 273 as being an option. But I can see myself at 218 being alive. Because, I always say this. I told my athletes this today. I'm the smallest Division I athlete you'll probably ever meet. Now, when I'm in a picture, I look like Shrek. But when I'm with Division I athletes, I look like somebody's little brother got in the picture, So even though 218 might sound big to a lot of our listeners, to me, it's a shrimp fest number. So what I did was I said, okay, let's get to 260, let's get to 250, let's get to 240. But one of the things I try to do with my everything is I try to put bumpers on it, guardrails, guardrails, whatever you want to call it. Somebody called it gutters, which okay. So I don't want to, I'm going down the street, don't want to fall in the gutter. That makes sense. So I put a number up here and I say, I'm never going to go through that number again, this top number, 230. And then here's the next goal, 220. And what I want to do now is sneak under 220 and then stay under 220. And in my next journal, there'll be orange flags when I'm over 220. And then when I'm under 220, there'll be yellow flags. And I can just look and see how I'm trending on that. Because it's all about, folks, it's all about rolling averages. If you don't know what rolling averages are, I mean, I have some work on it, if I could bore you with it, but it's all about rolling averages, and then on the financial side, because of a lot of issues, I was in real trouble about 3 years ago. And so I put this number out there, a very big number. And there are months, by the way, that I go through the ceiling on that number. I make a lot more, but I don't consider that the norm. And here's the thing I want you to know about the way we do this. And this all comes from Nick Peterson's book, Bumpers, is that over time, I just want to slowly nudge up my income. Watch this. Over time, I slowly want to nudge up my deadlift. Over time, I want to nudge up the number of wins we win in a 3 year period. If you have a program, you can get away with that. Okay. Maybe, over time, I want my athlete to throw farther and farther. And then what we do is that this bottom line, I want your worst to be better. So my worst day gets better all the time. So as a freshman, I don't know, say you throw 160 as a freshman and your worst meet was 130. Well, as a sophomore, I do want you to probably throw 170, 180, okay? But I want your worst meet to be 140. So even though things happen, I want your your worst to be better. So on the worst day of your life, how much can you deadlift, bench press, whatever it is? Okay. And over time, I want you to nudge that number up. Does that make sense? Did I go too long on it?
Absolutely.
So you can do this in any area of your life, and I certainly have. But the idea is you sit back and you say, as long as I'm within those two numbers, I'm having a perfect day. And occasionally I'm going to have a great month. Say I win the lottery and I get $1 billion. Well, I'm not going to think that every week. I'm going to now say I'm going to make $1 billion a week, right? In fact, I've had January was the best month of my life financially. And it's funny because February was the worst month of my life, because February is always a bad month in my business. In writing and in the training world, February is a terrible month. But I just had my best February. And because I just focused on this, and what I said to myself was, okay, so February is always bad. How can I nudge? I don't worry about my good months financially. I don't worry about my big lifts in the weight room. I look on those bad days and how can I just nudge those bad days, make the bad days. Folks, I don't have bad days. Okay. Like both of these guys said before they started recording, they both want to be me when they grow up. That's a true story. Okay, I was just joking. But as long as my worst day, I still meditate. I still start the day with coffee. I get all my emails read. I get all my responses. I write, I lift weights, I eat vegetables every meal. I drink water. I have fun on my worst days. So what I'm trying to do slowly is keep upping my worst days. And weirdly, that pounds the best days up too, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Coach, I'm curious with your weight loss journey and the success of that, is that more about the nutrition, or is it are you doing stuff differently with your training, or is it both?
Let me give you, I'll give you my book, Easy Strength for Fat Loss. Okay. Available at danjohnuniversity.com/bookstore. Um, so the biggest thing is the night before. So I set the coffee maker to wake me up in the morning. My perfect day, I don't ever use an alarm clock. If I have to get up at 6, I go to bed earlier. If I have to get up at 7, I go to bed 1 hour later. So I wake up to the smell of coffee. I meditate. I do either a 1-minute meditation called where I just count my breaths while this little timer goes off, or I do brain.fm. And I drink a lot of coffee, and I try to stay fasted until I lift. Okay. Coffee and fasting helps free up free fatty acids. The lifting, and it doesn't have to be very much, gets more free fatty acids, and then I go for a walk after that. And some people like Rusty Moore believe that, like little Pac-Man, the free fatty acids get eaten as I walk. And it's, by the way, it's only a half-hour walk. There's nothing to it. I mean, it's just not that big a deal. It's an hour, half hour in the weight room, half-hour walk. And then after that, I eat protein, veggies, and drink water. Later in the day, I do that again. And I just gave you everything. I just gave you the whole template. And I just gave you the whole book. Now, of course, you got to link together. It's nice, Rich, behind you have a brick wall. I see every day as a brick in everything. As a throws coach, today is one brick. As a football coach, and what you constantly do is build brick upon brick upon brick upon brick. And if you do that enough, you've got the Great Wall of China. The problem is people try to rush the bricks. They try to have one really big brick, one big training day. I find it's much better for the wall if I have, I don't know, 366 bricks this year and 365 bricks last year. And, in a 10-year period, that's 3,600 plus bricks. And, you're going to have a good sized wall. A lot of people I'm going to get the biggest brick I could possibly make. And then what? Well, I'm going to do it again. Well, yeah. So that's how I see things, if that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's
And
good to hear. I've been doing fasted exercise for probably 2 decades now. So,
yeah, I mean, and again, I've heard speakers get up at these workshops and say, I tell you this, you won't be able to notice any difference between fasted and unfasted. Maybe that's true, but there is a discipline behind the training fasted. And the other thing too is if I eat before, like, I've got a weightlifting meet coming, Olympic lifting meet coming up. I mean, I still would prefer not to Olympic lift with stuff in my tummy. I mean, that's just, I'm not delicate, but I just don't want to be in the gym, with a brick belly.
yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever eaten before a race, a marathon, ultra marathon. Obviously college is a little bit different because of the time schedule and stuff, but I'm just amazed when I talk to clients and other runners, they want to ask what I eat before or what should they eat. And I'm like, I don't, you have to figure that out because I haven't done that in quite a long time.
Well, I've got George Sheehan's books, and I thought I don't know for those who don't know him, just this great author from the 70s and 80s, just a wonderful.
Which we grew up in the same area as George Sheehan.
God bless you then. Great writer. And
Yeah.
he used to talk about why he would drink coffee before a race, and that was just to ensure a bowel movement.
Yep.
I think and this is going to sound rude to the listeners, I'm sorry, but to me, a bowel movement is much more important than what you ate in the morning. And that's why, I prepare my athletes here in the state of Utah at our high school track meet. We have competition at 8 in the morning. You're rolling out of bed on a Friday, and mom or the team bus, you got to get to the school, the team bus is there. You don't have a chance to have your normal morning. I tell you, and I mean this from the heart. We had a streak of like 9 straight state champions, and someone asked, what's the secret? And I say, because I look at the schedule and I know that we need to do the basics before I worry about if you're throwing at 8 in the morning as a thrower, do you really need any Do you need any carbohydrates? When I pick up my right foot in the discus, it takes me 1.6 seconds to deliver the implement. Do I really need any food to handle that? It's 6 throws, so we're looking at what, 8-9 seconds of effort. I think my body fat can handle all that. The little bit of sugar dripping through my system can handle that. Yeah. Yeah, I think nutrition is really important for performance, but not the day of.
Amen.
Yeah. And that's why my book on assessments called Can You Go? Because that is my assessment. You're going to tell me about you didn't get your bagel or whatever, and I'll be like, well, good. Can you go? Can you go? Because if you can't, well, you just wasted 8 years of your life. I'll be here next year, but you won't. And you'll say, of course I can. Well, then shut up and get going. I'll give you a hug after the event.
Rich, do you have anything for Coach before we get into the Final Four?
Uh, yes. Coach, I'm curious. You have such a collection behind you, and you've talked about
Well, that's nothing.
but you've also talked about, you mentioned a handful of different books and stuff. I'm curious, for you personally, inside and outside of your own work, what is the number one book that you've gifted?
The Sword and the Stone.
Okay.
I was in the 8th grade and I went to the Orange Public Library because I wanted to learn more about American football. I got 3 books. One was The Sword and the Stone. Well, hold on. Get ready. I got 7 Days to Sunday, which is, who can forget? It's over here somewhere. I just saw it. A book about the New York Giants, and I read about Kenny Avery on Wednesday, and he threw the discus, which is why I threw the discus. Miles Callum's book, Bodybuilding and Self-Defense. And with those 2 books, I was now prepared to play in the NFL, National Football League. And I saw that the librarian had recommended The Sword and the Stone. I liked the movie when I was 5 or 6, and I picked it up, and I went from being someone who struggled as a reader to being a lifelong learner because of that book. The Sword and the Stone, T.H. White, it's a love affair. The whole book is a love affair of education. And if you read through that lens, it'll inspire you. And when he does pull out The Sword and the Stone, it's the best paragraph of weightlifting I've ever read in my life.
Awesome. Thank you. And do you have one of your books that you would recommend the most for high school cross country and track and field coaches?
Yeah, well, you don't have to worry about anything because you go straight to heaven by being a high school track coach. You don't need any holy books. St. Peter's just like, yeah, you coach high school track? Come on, man. You suffered enough, my friend. Of my books, probably the more modern ones, the Easy Strength Omni book, only because most high school coaches, most track and field coaches have got to kind of learn that the role of the modern weight room, it's not about bodybuilding, it's about getting your athletes strong and then getting out them to do the work on their techniques and their other qualities. Get strong in the weight room and then get the hell out.
Coach, I guess I have another one before we get into the Final Four. Where do you, I guess it's a matter if you have both, use them, but where do you kind of see the using kettlebells and using barbells and when to kind of switch them out?
They're peas and carrots, man. If you watch your Forrest Gump, okay, so I have a concept, I call it the killer application. It comes from when computers first came out, they thought there'd only be 7 in the world. And then a Harvard guy, and this is the story, if it's true or not, I don't know. He put up this thing on the board and he asked his accountant friend, he goes, is there any value to this? And he goes, I hire 400 accountants a week to tell me what I can do with the push of a button. It's called the spreadsheet. The reason we have all this other stuff is because of the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is the killer application of the modern computer. With a spreadsheet, you can design buildings and you can test what they do in the wind, okay? the spreadsheet. So what I do is I look at every piece of equipment and I give what's its killer app. With the barbell, okay, obviously the Olympic lifts and the power lifts. You just can't do those lifts with anything but those. With the kettlebell, the goblet squat, probably the most important invention in the history of strength and conditioning. Whoever did it was a genius. Do you guys know who invented it?
To
Yeah.
you.
Me. Yeah, you're welcome. The swing, the goblet squat, and probably the Turkish get-up, though, obviously there's some clean and press things that are pretty good too. The ab wheel, the ab wheel. For suspension trainers, I thought they were the stupidest thing I ever saw in my life. But the T, the Y, the I, and the single arm row, those are game changers. Those little idiotic mini bands, put them around your socks and walk like this a couple of miles and tell me what it works. That $1 mini band is one of the best glute workouts you can get. So I use this concept called killer apps. Use the piece of equipment for what it's best at. When someone tells me they're doing kettlebell deadlifts, I usually do this. Oh, yeah. The same way you talk to somebody, they had a few too many concussions. Oh, yeah, that's nice.
Coach, down here in the South, we say, bless your heart.
Bless, bless your heart. Yeah, bless your heart. Yeah, bless your heart. But, and, when I see people do it, dumbbells are phenomenal for all kinds of things, but what they're good for, they're good for. And after that, they're not good anymore. If you're doing dumbbell deadlifts with 300-pound dumbbells, my thought is, what the hell are you going to do with them then? What else can you do with a 300-pound dumbbell? Dumbbells are great for farmer walks. They're great for complex training. You do like a number of exercises back to back to back. They're great for big groups. But like every piece of equipment also has its downfall. And generally, it's when you get away from its killer application. Try it. And listen, if all you got is a kettlebell and a broomstick, I can probably help you with the Olympic lifts. But it's going to be a lot better with an Olympic bar. Does that get you there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's one of those things where you kind of know the answer, but you want to ask Dan John because you got him on the line. But I appreciate that 100%.
Sure. Thank you.
Coach, we have 4 questions we ask all our guests at the end of every podcast. You kind of answered this first one, but you mentioned you're a coffee drinker. How do you brew your coffee and how do you take it?
Well, there's only appropriately two things that a cup of coffee should be. It should be hot and black. And it's funny because we do the grinding here and all that, but I'm just as good with that, the crystals and or even those. When I travel, I always travel with those Folger packets, and for me, and I always nowadays there's so little coffee in hotel, and who the hell puts decaf? Who drinks decaf? That is a crime against nature. And the hotels will have them, and especially those damn Marriott properties. They'll have like 2 decaf and 1 caffeinated. Who drinks decaf? I get it. I certainly understand non-alcoholic drinks and stuff, but somebody told me about a delicious non-alcoholic whiskey, and I thought, part of the reason I drink whiskey is to put up with the rest of you. Okay, that's an old joke. Sorry, I'll stop. Yeah,
That's great.
hot and black. Yeah.
Coach, you also kind of covered this one a little bit, but if there was anything you left out, do you have a daily practice or rituals that you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of Dan John?
See on the back of my journal here?
Mm-hmm.
That's my pirate map. I'll read it to you real quick. 1, before bed, prep coffee. Take supplements. To-do list for the next day. Review my 2 major goals, my financial and my physical. 2, meditate each day, either 1-moment meditation or brain FM. 3, fast until I train. Lift 3 days a week. If not Olympic lifting, body build and do the basics, including buns and guns. 2 days a week, do mobility and get those walks in. 4, eat fiber, fermented foods, and veggies as much as possible. 8 different ones a day. And number 5, our family mission statement, make a difference. Every day I try to make a difference somehow.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Coach, I appreciate that pirate map. You mentioned take supplements. I'm curious what supplements you take.
Pretty boring. Shoot, I don't. I get nothing. I won't take affiliates because I don't want to ever sell it. By the way, folks, gentle listeners, if you want me to sell out, I'd be happy to do it for your product as long as the number is real high. I take this supplement here called Hibernate. It is zinc, magnesium with a tiny vitamin D3 and a tiny bit of melatonin. It's a sleep supplement. The guys over at Hibernate are wonderful, and they're great to work with. I I I don't think it's a magic wand, but so I'm 67, right? So sleep hygiene is really important for me, where I'm at in my life right now. I remember when I was young and good looking. I miss those days. I uh, I was listening to some of the older teachers I was working with, and they were always complaining about they couldn't sleep at night. And then a couple of them made some real stupid life decisions. And I look back, I remember even thinking at the time, they were complaining about sleep for months and then made these idiotic life decisions. And that's when I discovered that not only, I mean, sleep is the best recovery tool, but it's also the best way to keep the brain sharp. And that's a real big deal to me, a really big deal. I don't know if either of you have ever had concussions. I had a terrible concussion, and I do have some issues with that. I have the best, since I work with the militaries, I have the best concussion support in the world because I got the, I'll do dinner with the smartest concussion expert in the world. So I have and so I'm very much into sleep, and I'll do anything for sleep hygiene. Um, if I don't know if you're wearing these on purpose, Jim, but I've got these glasses too. Now,
Yeah.
I use these glasses too. You know, if I ever find myself too attractive to women and I want to get them away
You
from
found my secret.
I'm just lady. So I know if there's any ladies listening, you're probably really attracted. So, see how it just stopped instantly. It just stopped. I do have eye masks. I'll do anything for sleep hygiene. Okay.
I am the same. I'm 37, and every year I gain a year of wisdom, but the more I grow as far as getting older, sleep is premium. And Rich makes fun of me for my blue blockers, but I am a proponent of
Yeah.
natural light, sun gazing,
And you
and
guys are a couple hours ahead of me too. So yeah. It makes sense. Yeah.
I'm kind of obsessed with as far as taking in artificial light, which kind of gives me some crap, but it's a big deal to me.
On the, like, for years I really recommended fish oil, but what I changed my diet a couple of years ago. I wouldn't say I'm a pescatarian, but I try to eat fish multiple times a week. And for me, and I got this is something I do. In Europe it's called tinned fish and sardines, but here in the States we call it canned. But I eat a lot of canned fish because they're real low in the food chain, the herrings and the sardines and stuff. And that's that. I would rather eat sardines, herring, anchovies, not on pizza, but that's how I'm trying to get my fish oil now. If that makes so, I do Blue Apron, and generally about 2 days a week, I'll have either cod, trout, or salmon that comes with the Blue Apron. So, so, so just gentle listener, just so you follow. If I find something that's working, if I think there's value to it, I'll often step back and then rethink it and say, okay, so fish oil is what you're all talking about. Fish oil. Uh, is there another way for me to approach it? Obviously, I'm not going to eat shark or tuna. Obviously, there's no problem with that. But so I try to find way low on the food chain, because what I've read, and it could be nonsense, that also has the least amount of toxins. The lower on the food chain, the least amount of toxins it has. And there is an issue with that. And you can close your eyes and say we don't, but there is the heart, especially the heavy metals.
Yeah.
And the only heavy metal I like is the clean and jerk. Sorry,
That's a good one.
I apologize.
Coach, what are you listening to right now? Music, podcasts, audiobooks? Are you reading anything?
Oh, reading. Yeah, yeah. I like to read a lot. I don't, I mean, this is just part, that's part of my little gym library. Um, I'm in a quiet period for reading right now, but I just, so my favorites are murder mysteries. I like Agatha Christie a lot. There's a Bernie Rodenbar. In fact, I just got a signed copy from Lawrence Block, the author, which is a big deal. I don't know how much he's gonna be around, but I like murder mysteries a lot. That's my candy reading, murder mysteries. Though they always cheat murder mysteries. They never give you all the information. They never do. Or it's so hidden you don't see it. I just finished a number of big books. I'm rereading Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie upstairs. Um, Other books. Oh yeah. In the last few weeks, I read the Psychology of Money, and then the follow up to it's something like Always the Same or something like that. But the Psychology of Money, if you don't mind, can I pull it up for you real quick?
Yeah.
Get the author right. Yeah, Morgan Housel, I think. If you read this book, it almost reads it. You could tell I read it on a plane. If you read this book and you just change the book to weightlifting or fitness or whatever, it reads. Oh, and that's something most of your listeners should pick up on, is that the secrets of finance and the secrets of physical are the same lessons. So I hate to say it, but the great lessons of life are all the same, whether it's throwing the discus far, or investing, or marriage, or kids. They're all the same lessons. Yeah, I just finished that, and I like that book a lot. Every Saturday, a group of people come over to my house. So, every day at 9:30, people come over and train with me. It's my intentional community. And on Saturdays, we have a finance group that meets, and we read books usually, and we're not it's just nice. It inspires me to make good decisions. Yeah. And it helps the younger guys a lot. Yeah.
Coach, what do you listen to when you work out? Do you listen to music?
Yeah. My favorite is bossa nova. I fell in love with bossa nova when I was young. I like jazz. Certainly, and my favorite album ever was Frank Sinatra singing with Jobim, the great, he wrote Girl from Ipanema. And they later found a whole bunch of the songs that they didn't put on the first album. I like classical music a lot. I like the neoclassicals, Gershwin, Ravel, and of course, the Warsaw Concerto, I think is beautiful. If I listen to rock and roll, I like this. I don't know if they made it, but they're called the Led Zeppelins. I'm a big fan of the Led Zeppelins, the Moody Blues. Um, I like a lot of classic rock, though sometimes it's just like, I just can't hear this again.
Yeah.
We're talking about the concept called an earworm today during our ruck. And Mike Brown mentioned the song "We Are the World." That's just the documentary just came out, and he goes, "It's the worst. That song gets in your head and it won't get out." So, yeah. So for me, and the other thing too is just remember, if you need music to psych up, you're afraid of the bar. So I like quiet music. Because when you're at the Nationals or a big meet, you don't get to play your jam. Now I know in some sports like powerlifting, I guess you can, but Olympic lifting, track and field, it's just you. So you better get comfortable in your own silence. And that's an easy sentence to say until you step in the ring after they say your name. Well, it's like in wrestling, everyone's a badass until they step on the mat. And, you got 500 people in the room, the high school auditorium at an away contest, and they're all saying terrible things about you. You know, that 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 opens your eyes as a human. I have a good story about that, but I know we're running short on time.
Coach, I'm going to use that with the PE kids tomorrow. If you need a pump up song, you're afraid of the bar.
Yeah, Yeah.
It's like, hold on, I gotta try and change my music. I gotta get the right song.
Well, I noticed this with we have a AAA affiliate here called the Bees, and they have their walk-up song. And my thought is, dude, you're a professional athlete. Mine would be the Ravel's Bolero, the 24-minute version, and I would insist that we wait on every up for the entire song. Yes, yeah.
That's awesome. Do you play an instrument?
Um, it's a tin flute. Beautifully bad. Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the
Right
tin.
on.
No, I'm horrible at it, and maybe it's because it's not a good one. But used to play the guitar as a kid. Nah, and yeah, if you don't, yeah, I'm not. I don't have the brain for it. I don't have the mind for it.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
and some people don't. Yeah. Now I can write a book in 2-3 months. I can write an article. John Duquesne from Dragonor thinks it's hilarious. He goes, "I need an article. What's it on?" 2 hours later, he has 12-page article. I can write, but I don't have. Maybe I just don't have that skill. Music. Yeah.
Has that always been the case with writing for you, or is that something you just worked at?
Oh yeah. It's if you make your living as a writer and you wait for the muse, you're not going to make a living.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's perspiration, not inspiration.
Right on.
Well, you get strong.
That's right.
Do
If
you
if you need to be inspired, get the hell out of this sport.
do you feel that reading helps your writing? We
Yes.
had Martin Rooney on, and he said before you write a book, you better read 1,000.
Well, 1,000's a lot or a little, but yeah, most of the writers I know who write a lot are also pretty good readers. But I also have a lot of friends who are very good readers, so that helps me a lot. One of our buddies, TJ, is reading the Brothers Karamazov, and I haven't read it in a while, but we have these discussions while we ruck about the Brothers K. I mean, that to me is we'll talk about Greek tragedies, Shakespeare.
Sounds like one of the most intellectual rucks in the world.
You wake up one day and it's like there's more to this world than looking good on some beach on spring break.
Yeah,
You
that's true.
one day the other day I had all my grandkids here at the house and my both daughters. You know, not one time did either daughter ask me about my 6-pack abs.
Coach,
That,
last one for you. Do you have a guilty pleasure or guilty pleasures? Could be food. I know you've got
yeah,
your
yeah,
nutrition
yeah,
goals. What
yeah,
do you
yeah,
got?
yeah. I do. I have a couple of them. At night, it's in the Swedish. It's hygge, Hygge. At night, I like to get very comfortable. I like to sit on the couch, and I like to watch like How I Met Your Mother or Modern Family or some of the Office reruns, the UK version of Ghost. My guilty pleasure is, getting this time of year, getting under a comfortable blanket, and kind of watching some silly a 20-minute sitcom. I like that a lot. If you have a beverage with it that it is translated into the water of life, it's even better. Yes. That's whiskey in case the kids don't know that. Yeah. Yeah. That would be mine. Silly, good sitcoms at night in a dark house. The dogs, they're my dog my dog Sirius Black isn't gonna be with us much longer, but he'll fart and remind the world about, which will remind me about, eh, life without that. So yeah, so that's mine. Yeah.
Okay,
That's,
thank you.
and when the weather gets better, riding my idiotic bike around. I've got this cruiser bicycle, terrible for where I live, in the hills of Utah. Weighs about 300 pounds, but I love my damn bike. I love riding it around. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Coach, thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for
Sure.
joining us. I really enjoyed this conversation and sitting under your wisdom tree.
Well, thank you. And I hope you learned something. And folks, those of you listening, if you email me or ping me, I swear I'll answer you back as best I can. Okay.
Coach, it's been an honor, pleasure. Really appreciate your time. I feel a little bit smarter and a lot more motivated. So thank you.
Thanks. Thanks. Inspiration, not perspiration. No, perspiration, not inspiration.